The real estate market is constantly changing. Now that the weather is starting to warm up, it's important to stay ahead of the new trends and know what to expect. Here's a market temperature check for spring with Mike Reilly and Mike Ferrante. We also discuss investors and vacant houses in Cleveland and who is ripping off grandma in the real estate market. Stay tuned. This is the Cleveland Real Estate Investor Podcast.
Hi, everybody. This is Mike Reilly with my sidekick, Mike Ferrante. Good afternoon, Mike.
Hey, great to be here.
Yep. So looking outside my window in this March 11th, Saturday, March 11th, 12th, 12th. And we're looking at 2 inches of snow. And so it doesn't look like a real heat check out there, Mike, but next week, we're going to be 50s.
No, my
60s.
computer's telling me 19 degrees.
Yeah, it's 19 degrees here in beautiful Cleveland, Ohio. But next week it's going to be 50s, 60s, and I think we're going to say sayonara to the snow because long-range forecast is for it to be milder than normal. So, Mike, let's go to the analytics because I know all our listener wants to know about the March heat check in the beginning of the spring market.
Yeah, for sure. So even though it's cold outside today, the real estate market is still quite hot. We're still seeing stories about showings, having 45 people showing up to an open house and multiple offers, over list price, all that kind of stuff. What I can tell you is that things are kind of flat as far as inventory. So this inventory shortage we've been experiencing has kind of flattened out. And as I'm looking at the numbers, February and March both had a slight increase in inventory. But that said, we also get more demand in the spring, and the number of days to sell has been steadily dropping again. And I think that trend's going to continue, Mike. I think that you're going to see more homes hitting the market, but that because there's still all this pent-up demand, that it's still going to be very much a seller's market. Homes are going to sell quickly, multiple offers, over list price in many cases. So more of what we saw last year.
Right. Well, it's kind of like think about the gas prices, with the sanctions on Russia, price barrel of oil is well over 100. But
yep.
as it gets more expensive, you're going to have people start drilling for more oil. So, and the price will come down. So you're looking at the free market system at work here on housing, right?
Exactly. I mean, I think when they let the free market do its thing, that entrepreneurs and business people find a way to make things happen. We always talk about that, Mike, solving a problem.
You're right. And you know what? I was reading on Nextdoor today, Cleveland Heights next door in my area, Forest Hill, which also encompasses, other next doors localities on the east side. And, everybody's blowing up investors. Investors are bad news. So who are the buyers here of these properties?
It's still a mix. And, I think part of what has caused our inventory shortage here in Northeast Ohio is the influx of investors. We talked about it on a previous podcast, but in Cleveland proper, the city of Cleveland, somewhere between 50 and 70% of the sales last year were to investors. They're buying for cash flow, buy and hold, and of course, driving those prices up. And when they're gobbling up a lot of the entry-level inventory, it's kind of a trickle up or trickle down from there, or whatever you want to call it. That gets pinched. So the moderately priced homes start going up in value. And and then of course, high priced homes are selling fast and going up in value. But some of it is being driven by investors. There's still a lot of owner occupants out there, and they're competing with each other. They're competing with the investors. And those are the stories that you hear on the news. Oh, families are waiving inspections and bending over backwards, giving the sellers whatever they want. The funny memes on Facebook, hey, we got your offer, but it's all blank. And then the meme says, yeah, we're just so tired of writing offers. We're just sending over a blank contract. Let the sellers fill in whatever they want.
So, okay, but let's get back to my first question. Can the analytics tell you the percentage of buyers that are investors versus owner occupied?
I don't have access to that data. I can only give you anecdotal evidence, and I can tell you that the investor business is still very, very strong. We're still getting calls daily from investors saying, "Hey, I want to get in on this."
Okay, so now, all right, so let's just focus on investors, which have become the bête noire of of Cleveland Heights. So what are these investors doing with these properties? Are they buying them for rental income, or are they buying them to flip?
It's still a mix. I think because the appreciation is so great right now, we're probably seeing more of an uptick on buy and hold than buy to flip. But there's a house we just sold on Superior that needed a complete rehab, and that certainly was a buy to flip. So you're still seeing both, but I think there's definitely an uptick in buy to hold.
Right. Okay. Buy and hold, and then rent. And now the other thread that's coming out in next door, as they rail against investors as if it's just like this one big monolith, is that they're fleecing senior citizens and grandma. And what's your anecdotal opinion of that?
Well, it depends on what segment of the investor market you're talking about. There are a lot of investors who are true entrepreneurs, and they understand that doing good business is good business. So they buy a house from someone, they take care of them, they're fair, and next thing you know, they're referring their friends. And that's how smart business people, I think, grow their businesses. But there's certainly, just like predatory lending back during the crash of '08, the predatory lending practices contributed to that. There's predatory investors. There's these wholesalers that call grandma, and grandma still thinks her house is worth $80,000 because that's what it was worth. That's more than it was worth 15 years ago. So that must be right. They get grandma under contract, and then they find someone else to buy the house for $120,000, and these wholesalers are making a quick 30-40,000 by getting grandma under contract for a much lower price. And I think certainly there's some of that out there where grandma got fleeced. So those are the stories that you hear about.
What just begs the question, hey, it's a seller's market. And you know what? I don't want grandma to get fleeced. But the same thing could happen with somebody calling grandma and asking for their Social Security and their credit card. I mean, that just happens all the time. It's not just, folks, it's not the investors. Yeah, there's predatory there's criminals all over the place. But if grandma is going to be stupid enough to sell her house to somebody calling up in the face of, without talking to her neighbors, I mean,
or her kids.
But all she got to do is talk to her neighbors. Just go outside. Just talk to the next door neighbor. I just got a call. Someone wants to buy my house for $100,000. They're like, what? Your house should be worth $200,000. I mean, 100%. The neighbors have a vested interest in making sure for the comps that grandma doesn't get ripped off.
Yeah. And these stories, Mike, these are the exception, but of course that's what's on the news. That's what gets blown up. People talk about just the bad that's going on. I've got a friend who's a wholesaler, and he also happens to be a licensed real estate agent. Quick story here. He found grandma in Cleveland. She was on the west side of Cleveland, and he made grandma an offer. This was a couple of years ago. Said, hey, I'll give you 40 for your house. She's like, I don't know. And then so this guy, this friend of mine said, well, if you want more, talk to Mike. And so I talked to grandma, and I told grandma I probably could get her 60 or 62, maybe even 65. And so I didn't hear back from grandma. And a couple days later, my friend called me up and said, yeah, grandma called me back and said, even though she could get more, she just wants the easy path. Hey, I'm going to write her a check. She doesn't lift a finger. She has all the time she needs to move out. And grandma had all the information and still chose to sell her house for $40,000. So, he's doing it the right way, full disclosure. I think the ones that we hear bad stories about are the ones where grandma didn't know that she was leaving that much money on the table.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes, though, like you said, and we've had these deals where our price is a little bit less not a lot less, but it's a little bit less, but it's a cash offer. And there's flexibility about how they move out, how long, because they've got some uncluttering, they got to set up, their exit strategy. Maybe they're going to a retirement, semi-retirement village or something like that. So there is, to them, it's worth not squeezing every penny out for the sale just so they can have, the ease of exiting.
That's right.
Mike, that's what goes on.
Right. One of the biggest things we're hearing right now from sellers, everyone pretty much knows now what's going on in the market. But the biggest objection I hear when I talk to someone and I say, hey, you thinking about selling your house? They say, sure, but where will I go? That's right. Their concern is they can't buy something easily. And that whole idea of being flexible and having options for the sellers, that's where the money is. So they're not going to, like you said, squeeze every nickel out if there's some potential to rent back or have more time to move, whatever it is.
Well, and then here's the other strategy. My 92-year-old mother-in-law is in her house in Shaker, and she's got a chairlift. Takes her up the stairs, up and down. And then we just retrofitted her house with Blink cameras, Amazon smart home devices. So, if she falls, she can immediately, call the Amazon device. I'm not going to say the Amazon device because I'm recording this in my living room and the Amazon device is right next to me. It'll start, as soon as I say that magic word, it'll start asking me what I want. But it just goes to show you that there are options to help people stay in their home. They don't necessarily have to downsize, move into a ranch house. They can retrofit the house so they can still live there. Make it fall proof. Make it somewhere where you've got these Amazon devices scattered around. So if you do fall, all you got to do is ask Amazon to, call, their kids, call 911, that kind of thing. And you could also set up these new Echo. They call them, I think it's Echo 8, where they've got a video screen there. So the video screen can be in the kitchen. My my sister-in-law lives in Toronto, Canada. She can watch her mom is in the kitchen now and just reach out and say hello. I mean, it's all there now. So grandma doesn't have to sell her house. But at the end of the day, come on, grandma's needs to get herself up to speed in terms of selling the house. So, the big bad wolf investor out there, he's there, but he's also there looking for the Social Security number and your credit card. So,
my view on it is, and it's a completely objective view. To me, values, if investors buy, they don't buy, it really doesn't change my life much. But I think, Mike, that at least in Greater Cleveland, the general population should be thanking investors. And I'll tell you why. In 2008 to 2012, when all these derelict homes were on the market and no one wanted them, and they were just causing eyesores. You talk about this all the time with Forest Hill. These homes that people aren't taking care of that are sitting vacant, they gobbled them up. And in most cases, they rehab them and resell, or rehab them and rent them. And at least they're generating income for the cities and they're productive. The other thing they did, in addition to improving the housing stock, is that they helped values increase. So all you neighbors of people, these neighbors of the houses that were sitting there vacant, your values went up partially because investors were gobbling up houses and they've created more competition and demand for the homes in your neighborhoods. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying you should be kissing their feet, but hey.
Well, and that's the thing about the free market and capitalism. It can be messy. It's not always going to be perfect. And I think we're starting to see a lot of buzz on Nextdoor on the forum, and it is a robust conversation about bad housing in Cleveland Heights, which has been a real problem for Cleveland Heights as opposed to Lakewood. there are a lot of vacant houses. And I had Tony Kuda on earlier, the new councilman, and I watched the YouTube video the other day on his first meeting with housing, and it was surreal. I mean, Tony's heart's in the right place. I mean, he knows that housing is a problem. But as I said to Tony, in the podcast, I worry that he's going to get sucked into that bureaucratic morass and nothing's going to get done. And we're going to be sitting around here a year later with people still mouthing these, myths about investors and owner occupied and this and that, when really the problem in front of us in Cleveland Heights, which is impacting retail and crime, are houses that sit there for years not getting cleaned up. I'm talking years. And sometimes it is an investor who buys the house. And folks, let me just define what an investor is. First of all, it's not these conglomerates coming in. They're buying 60 homes. A lot of these investors are wannabe real estate moguls. They're one guy who sets up an LLC. He buys the house. He doesn't know what he's doing. He gets in over his head. He walks away from the loan, the hard money loan he got to fix it up. And maybe his in-laws helped finance the loan. So now they're on the hook. And meanwhile, this house sits there for a year and a half unfinished. And I have 3 houses in Forest Hill that I could walk to right now where that's happened, where these houses were started a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. They're still sitting there. They're still, the house is half painted. There's maybe a step ladder leaning against the garage. The front steps were taken out. They're still unfinished. And they just sit there. And you got to ask yourself, what is the city doing about that? It's just these are just mammoth eyesores in certain sections of Cleveland Heights. Your
Right.
Thoughts, Mike?
Yeah,
I got to calm down now here. I'm getting all amped up.
Hey, let's stop here. We got to pay some bills. 30 seconds, and we'll be back. If you've been listening to this podcast, then you understand or should understand the pitfalls of investing in Cleveland real estate. Say you're looking for an investment property to rent, and these are the things that could happen and often do. You overpay for a house, and it's in the ghetto. Then you find that it's a money pit with endless surprise repairs. Your hapless property manager, who may be the brother-in-law of the realtor, gets a tenant who after 3 months stops paying the rent. Then the toilet explodes, and you have nobody to repair it because, guess what? The property manager is not answering the phone. Yep, that's the ugly side of the Cleveland real estate market. But we have a solution. Buy one of our properties. It's been inspected. It's been vetted. It's in a rock-solid part of town. It comes with a Gold Star tenant paying top dollar rent, and we manage it. Call us at 216-371-8160 if you're interested.
No, and we've talked about the difference between Cleveland Heights and, say, a city like Lakewood. With Cleveland Heights, it was just the sheer volume of houses that they had, and then, of course, not enough manpower. There was a time in Cleveland Heights where you had to wait 4, 5, 6 weeks for your point of sale inspection because that's how backed up they were. And I think, because of the monetary issues that they were having, they, cut staff and, all that perfect storm of things. And so that's what you have in Cleveland Heights. And now you're trying to get back up the hill as opposed to a city like Lakewood, which never really got hit that hard in the recession and never had the sheer volume of vacant houses that Cleveland Heights and some of these other cities had. And Cleveland Heights isn't the only one, Mike. We talk about Cleveland Heights because we do a lot of work there, and obviously you're there. But there were other cities that got hit really, really hard too. Maple Heights, they're the poster child for Hey, Maple Heights is the next East Cleveland, and you can look up those cities and make your own assessments. I happen to think that Maple Heights has really good leadership in place and that they're going to be okay in the long run, but they're recovering from a really huge setback during the recession.
Right. They talk about predatory loans and, I have relatives who did the refis in 06, 07. They used their houses as piggy banks. And then when the music stopped on musical chairs, they had no place to sit. And all of a sudden they were $100,000 underwater because they were using the home equity. They were encouraged to use the home equity to pay for college, to pay for, toys, motorcycles, upgrades that they didn't do. And so a lot of these are small investors. These are some of my relatives investing. These are people that think, getting into real estate is printing money, and they don't know what they're doing. Meanwhile, I'll just speak to Cleveland Heights because I work with Cleveland Heights all the time. The housing staff there have been heroes, understaffed, basically whacking moles, I think, in the last, 10 years.
Right.
And I think we have too many people who have too many degrees in urban planning that don't realize what the problem is in front of them with housing, because maybe they didn't study the housing crash in college when they got their degree. Because what happened in 08 is like the AIDS crisis. Hey, folks, if you're a doctor and it was the mid-late 80s and you started hearing about AIDS, you didn't know what it was because you didn't study it. It was new. And so the housing crash was new in 08. And the repercussions on cities was new. So you have all these people with degrees in urban planning who don't know how to handle this particular problem. And so what they do is they just sweep it under the rug. Now, at that YouTube meeting that I saw, what was interesting? Because they had the head guy of housing, and of course they asked him, do you have enough staff? You don't have to ask him that question. We already know he doesn't have enough staff. Okay. And then you got the mayor staying up there. Well, everybody, needs more staff. No, housing needs staff. Full stop, period. Because housing is at the center of all the other problems. The crime, the gunshots in some of these neighborhoods, the retail, lack of. I'm looking at you, Severance Center, and some of these areas in Noble, which are now being filled up by dollar stores, which is always a bad sign, as opposed to coffee shops. I mean, you go up to Fairmont Cedar, or you go up to South Taylor and Fairmont, up at the Royal Heights, you don't see any dollar stores there. Oh, instead you see Gigi's Restaurant, On the Rise Bread Store.
Yep.
Down at Fairmont Cedar, you see Zug. You're seeing Jake's Place, Fairmont Wine Bar, Barrios, Aladdin's, the redo of Nighttown, which is coming. But you don't see any dollar stores there. You know why? Because there's no vacant housing in there. You go over to Noble Road, that area, just drive up and down the street. Just count the dilapidated houses, the vacant houses, and then go and look at the retail. The retail sucks in that area. And so if you're going to say, well, we're gonna juice up the planning commission here, or the planning staff, and we're going to work on these neighborhoods. No, just clean up the houses. Just clean up the houses, get after these deadbeat landlords or LLCs that don't know what they're doing, or bank-owned properties that just sit there, and sell them, and just seize them, clean them up, sell them to maybe make a sweetheart deal with owner-occupier. And then watch the retail come back. Watch the safety in that particular neighborhood improve. And of course, now you can collect taxes. So this whole strategy of focusing on housing is unclogging a lot of problems in other areas.
Yep, I agree, Mike. And I think the key is understanding what's going on and adjusting, adapting. Not to dwell on the recession and the housing crash of '08, but the problem that these cities had, Cleveland Heights included, is that they kept doing business as usual. Well, you can't do that. Things have just changed on a very base level. It's no longer the same market. It's the housing market has changed. You have to change your policies and the way you attack it. You have to, and they didn't. And you saw what happened. Cities that adapted. I'll give you an example. Garfield Heights didn't suffer as badly in the recession because midstream they said, "Man, this isn't going well. We're still hitting people with these point of sales and these huge escrow amounts. Let's do something." And so what they did midstream is they said, "You know what? We're not going to do escrow hold anymore." They stuck to their guns on the point of sale, but as soon as they stopped doing escrow hold, you saw the housing market start to bounce back a little bit. And that's what I mean by adjust. Free market adjusts, but government doesn't.
Yeah, and here's the other thing about government. One of the dirty little secrets about why these houses just sit there vacant is the fact they're overloaded with taxes from the county. And, now, we got this land bank here that's going to take this house because it's, and then forgive the property taxes. You know what? If you take some of these vacant houses that have been like that for years, they're probably worth in the open market, say 20,000, because they got 100,000 in repairs that is needed. Guess what their tax bill is? Their tax bill is 50,000. Who's going to buy a house for 70,000, 50 and what it's really worth, and then put 100 in and then expect to get back that 170 in an area of a little 3-bedroom house that's only worth 120? Folks, I know I'm going fast on the math, so maybe I want to rewind that. But that's the reality. I've seen, and of course they say they have the land bank. The land bank is just crawling along. They're doing good work, but they can't handle this volume. But if you go to if I was the mayor of Cleveland Heights, I'd say I would get on TV and I'd say, I'm going down to the county. I've got a list of 100 homes here, and I want the county to forgive the taxes here so I can get these houses cleaned up. Now, where do you study that in urban affairs? That doesn't exist. And sometimes I think, and I'm not going to speak ill of the mayor of Cleveland Heights, our first mayor. I mean, guys just getting his feet wet. I get that. So this is not directed at him. But I know in the past I've dealt with people that are running for council or, are involved in these kind of political, action committees and stuff like that. They don't want to make waves. They don't want to put the county the spotlight on them. And, I think about my hero, Judge Plinka. Remember the late Judge Plinka?
Oh,
Mike?
Judge Pianka, yeah.
Pianka, I'm sorry. Judge Pianka. I should get this guy's portrait and put a candle. He died a couple of years ago. This guy was relentless in going after banks, out-of-state conglomerates that were buying properties. He said, if you don't get this house cleaned up, I'm fining you $1,000 a day. Remember that?
Oh, I remember Judge Pianka well.
Tell us the story.
Well, he was relentless. Everything you said is true, and I agree that he was the guy at a time when we needed a hammer. He wasn't afraid to be the hammer. I, of course, had some experiences with Judge Pianka that were not positive. That I would say that
don't speak ill of the dead.
Of the dead, yeah, I know. So here's the thing, I think Judge Pianka took things a little too far, and because he was so in hammer mode that when he got good people in front of him, and you might say, well, Mike, how could you be in front of Judge Bianca if you're good people? Well, I used to own a building on West 25th Street. Somebody sprayed graffiti on my building like they did so many times, and I got a ticket once. And I said, geez, I try to get down there and paint over the graffiti as often as I can. But, this one time I didn't get down there, Bianca hammered me. And I'm like, dude, this just happened. I paint over the graffiti on a monthly basis, cut me a break here. And
Yeah.
man, he hit me pretty hard on that one.
Yeah, I guess he was probably at his wit's end. I mean,
I'm sure.
we're gonna cut him some slack. I know with Cleveland Heights, one of the other problems is the disconnect between housing court and housing department, because the thing that came through on the YouTube video of the housing committee stuff was the fact that there's some cases there where these people have been in violation for years. Now, look, I work with the city. We've got some stuff we got to take care of. The weather changes. We're short staffed. I'll go to the housing staff. They're great. They'll say, yeah, Mike, we're good. 6 months extension. And because they know we have a track record of taking care of the houses that we own. And they've seen us take these wrecks and transform them into, best house on the street award. But the housing court has not adapted to this new reality of the last 10 years. Just nuisance abatement. I mean, they should be working with the city housing staff to create a nuisance abatement process that can really fast track these homes that have been just stinking up streets for years that I talked about earlier. And nuisance abatement, we talked about in an earlier podcast, is one of those tickets that, city can come in and just seize these houses or get the neighbors to file a suit and really work with the neighborhood. Go out there, the housing staff or somebody from the city who's got a desk that deals with customer complaints. And you know what? That's another complaint that I hear all the time. Who do they call? Who does somebody who lives in Cleveland Heights and is looking at a house across the street that's been vacant for 2 years? Now you got somebody squatting in there. And maybe a couple weeks down the road, you hear gunshots. I mean, that's a reality. Okay. So those people sticking their head in the sand and not making that connection, pull it out. There's got to be some desk at the city that can literally be the complaint desk, and pay them double the pay to answer those phone calls. And then they can talk to housing. Then they can be, an advocate for these neighborhoods and go after those. Maybe there's 100 really, really bad eyesore homes. They should be at the top of the list.
I agree.
Thoughts?
And Mike, so hearing you go on that tangent there, I have some advice.
Not a tangent, rant. Go ahead.
Rant. That's the word I'm looking for. The lesson, I think, to be learned from all of this is when you are investing in a neighborhood, and we're using our greater Cleveland Heights as an example, that the city, the building department, the housing department, all these folks can be powerful allies. Okay, now not all of them are doing things the right way, as we just talked about, but I think it's hugely important to remember that. And remember, whether they're good, bad, in the middle, they still are holding a lot of the cards. So you need to work with these folks. And where I'm going with this is I'm not going to say names, but when you're looking at either owning property, being an investor, hiring a property manager, you want to make sure that you're treating these folks as allies. They're not the enemy. Maybe they're not doing everything right, but allies. And the reason I bring this up is that there are one or more property managers here locally that are at war with some of these cities. And I probably shouldn't use that analogy given what's going on over in Europe and Asia right now. But they've basically declared war on the city of Cleveland in one case. And I'm thinking to myself, man, why would anyone ever want to hire a property manager who isn't working on their relationship, working on having, rowing in the same direction as the city, as the building department. It just is insanity to me. So I wanted to pull that thread out and just say that for the record, because I think if you're looking to invest, whether it's here or anywhere, you should be working with people who have good, solid relationships with these building and housing departments.
Well, I think that's, to wrap this up in a nice tidy bow, we talked about the myths of the housing crisis, the big bad investors, the big bad wolf landlords. And this problem is not necessarily just black and white like that. And
well put.
And so, yeah, you've got investors who want to buy properties in Cleveland Heights. I deal with them. And trust me, folks, they're one person in California who's looking to diversify their investment into real estate. And they heard Cleveland was an up and coming city and they want to invest. I'm not talking about dealing with a conglomerate. I'm talking about dealing with somebody we have a couple of these people. They're in San Diego. You can hear them talking on earlier podcasts we call Point of View. We got Gerardo in San Diego. We got Renee up in Northern California. I mean, these people are putting their money investing into Cleveland. They're not big and bad. But on the other hand, a lot of them have gotten screwed by a property manager that brings in a bad tenant and they can't get them evicted.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, Renee's property is getting destroyed. So, it's not, these politicians, some politicians, not all politicians, because, we don't want to make that black and white, but some politicians, they just make it so simplified. They go after these property managers as if that's the problem. It's not the problem. It's education and regulation. That's what you have to have. So if you want to be working with property managers. I mean, I work with a great guy in Shaker. He's semi-retired. He sounds like he's got this gravelly voice. Sounds like he should be on the Sirius jazz station. And we're always talking about, well, he's dealing with this Israeli group. And these people are assholes in terms of landlords and property managers. And the hammer's got to go down on them. But don't put everybody in the same basket. This is a complicated problem. And at the end of the day, the first step should be to reduce and to clean up those 100 super bad houses and let everybody in the city know that we have tagged this house. It is bad. I'm sick of looking at it. And we're going to go after it and clean it up and start creating a new vibe in Cleveland Heights where we take the cleanup of bad houses seriously. Because right now they don't. They haven't been taking it seriously. All they do is talk about it and study it to death. Final thoughts, Mike?
I'm just going to give you the slow clap.
Okay. All right.
Well said, Mike. I can't say it any better.
Okay. All right. Well, folks, we had not only heat check, but we had blood pressure check here on the Cleveland Real Estate Investor. And Mike, you're all jazzed up now, right? So we'll let you loose on the house. You can get all your chores done. Okay.
Ready to face the weekend. Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll have another hot podcast in about a week or so. Okay. Bye-bye, Mike.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Cleveland Real Estate Investor Podcast with Mike Reilly. Please add our show or follow us on Spotify, Overcast, Apple Podcast, or Spotify. Leave a like or comment on the video. All engagement is appreciated. Subscribe to us on YouTube as well for video content coming soon. For any Cleveland listeners or Cleveland Browns fans, you can check out our other podcast, Cleveland Browns Anonymous, for our weekly group therapy session. This is also on all the same platforms as the Cleveland Real Estate Investor.